Yes, for the most part. Yeah,
Sure.
I may skim it, I may not read the whole
Right.
thing.
And then you, every time it came out in the local news on Channel 9 especially, you would watch it
If
when
it was
came
there,
out?
yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
During the 6 o'clock hour.
Sure,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay.
And did you ever pay attention in terms of national news, or do you watch any national news, like Fox, CNN, or the, NBC, CBS, ABC?
Again, Channel 9, Diane Sawyer.
Okay.
And if she had anything, it would be on.
So she's ABC, I believe.
Is that right?
Okay, all right. I think, I'm not positive about
Maybe.
that. Okay, but did, whatever they had on regarding the case, you would watch?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Just the news in general, yeah.
Now, the news sometimes, even the newspaper and TV, sometimes have the news, the old-fashioned, I can tell my age, Walter Cronkite would tell you the news.
Yes, sir.
Right? But then now you also have commentators that you didn't have before. My point is, have you watched any of that stuff, like lawyers or other people talking about the case?
No, just
Okay.
the news.
So it was just strictly the news, at least? Okay.
Right, yeah, I'm not aware of the other.
Okay. What impressions, if any, did you have regarding the media in terms of how they were treating the case? Did you think they were slanted one way or the other, or did you think it was a fair coverage? That's what I'm trying to get from.
Yes, I understand what you're saying. I'm not certain what their motivation is. My assumption is that they're covering what happened.
Okay, so you felt they were just covering strictly the news?
Right, yes.
Okay. And I gather from what you saw on TV and read in the paper, you didn't form opinions one way or the other, either in favor of the state on behalf of Trayvon Martin or the defendant, George Zimmerman. You didn't form opinions one way or the other.
No,
Okay.
I never went that far with it, just honestly.
Now, I'm sorry, and you mentioned also that you discussed it with friends out of town that would tell you what's going on in Sanford.
Yeah, they just wanted to know. They hear what on the news they're getting. My family, as I said, mostly live in Jacksonville.
Okay. Okay. What do you recall, if any, that they told you about the case that you had not heard yourself or seen in the news here? Did they give you any more insight?
No.
Well, in Jacksonville, they're saying this or that.
No,
Okay.
they didn't get involved in it.
Sure.
They're not that interested in it, I'm afraid.
Okay. And did any of that family that you discussed this with, did they give you their opinions about the case? I know you say you don't have opinions,
No.
but did they say, wow, this shouldn't have happened, or this should have happened, or whatever it
No,
was?
sir. They're
Okay.
just maybe that, I hate to say not that interested, just it wasn't, we've got a very big family and we've got more dysfunction than,
Okay.
we're more talking
Sure.
about that than
Okay.
anything.
How about, did you ever have discussions with friends about the case?
No, sir.
Okay.
No.
Did you ever do any research on your own in terms of on the internet? You had on the second page, you had scratched off in terms of potential conflict. You originally, it looked like you had kind of strike and then you put no.
What was the question? I don't
It was
recall.
regarding, it expected this trial will last a certain period of time potentially, and
Would that be a conflict?
right, would that be a hardship?
Not in the sense that I have children and responsibility. I just have a dog and a 20-year-old cat, and
Okay.
I'd have to manage.
Yes, but so it's, in your opinion, it's not a hardship?
Not like for simpler actions.
Okay. So you understand your civic responsibilities?
Yes, I
Okay.
had to back off that.
So that would not present a problem, is what I'm getting at.
No, sir.
Okay. And then you also did, on the last question that was asked, in terms of whether there was any other matter that you wanted to bring to the court's attention, you notated that you're concerned about all the press, TV coverage, cameras outside the courthouse.
It was pretty daunting.
So I gather by that statement, you're saying when you came in Monday morning,
Oh, yeah.
everything out there.
I was shocked.
And I think you referred to it as intimidating. I think
It is.
was the
I mean-
word. Okay. You understand that, obviously, as Judge Nelson, I believe, already told you yesterday morning, is that we're calling you by B51,
For like a
and then
bomb.
your picture is not being shown. In other words, there is cameras, there's media here, but by law, they are not showing your picture or anything. You understand that?
I do.
And also, when you were coming in, they were not allowed to record you at all. Okay.
No, sir.
Okay. Do you have any concern about that, other than it was a bunch of stuff out there? There was a bunch of media.
It was surprisingly
Okay.
amount, yes.
Okay. My question, and I guess what I'm trying to ask you maybe inartfully is, you notated that as a point at number 6 in terms of anything not covered in the questionnaire that you wanted to alert the court and both sides to. Is that just an observation on your part that there was a lot of media out there?
Yes, and perhaps and a lot of policemen. I mean, this is unusual circumstances, true, but I was surprised about it all, and I thought it was rather well done, handled-wise. I wasn't fearful. I just was surprised.
In terms of well handled by the sheriff's office and all the other officials in terms of escorting you through there? And
yes, sir. I thought it was great in that regard.
Yes, ma'am. My question is of you is, would that in any way impact you being able to sit in a jury? I gather from your answers it would not.
No, sir.
Okay. I'm going to have a moment, Your Honor. You mentioned family in Jacksonville. Do you have any other family here, or is it mainly in Jacksonville?
Yes, sir.
And I think I already asked you, but they didn't express opinions about the case one way or the other,
No,
did
sir.
they?
Not really.
Okay. So the bottom line is, just like in any case, you can agree to abide by the judge's instructions and disregard whatever media stuff you've been exposed to. Is that correct?
The past, you mean?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
I,
And I know you've abided by the court's instructions yesterday morning not to watch any movie, I guess.
Truly, that's correct. I have to do
And
that.
see, my question is as follows, ma'am. You're sitting as a juror.
Yes, sir.
You're listening to the evidence. Witness number 1 says A, B, C happened.
Yes, sir.
Not in terms of the TV station, but just, A, B, and C.
Right.
And you say, well, okay, that's what the witness said, but God, I seem to remember that it was really D, E, F.
Yes, sir.
Do you understand that D, E, F is not an evidence?
Correct.
And you cannot in any way factor that into your final decision. Can you agree with that?
I do understand that. Yes, sir.
Okay. So if you were to be sitting as a juror and in listening to the evidence, you seem to remember something about what you saw on the news, you understand that's not evidence unless it happens in this courtroom with everybody here, the defense, the state, and the court.
I'm aware.
Can
Yes,
you
sir.
agree with that?
I understand. Yes, I do.
And arriving at your decision only on what happens in the courtroom.
I do. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. West.
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Don West,
Yes, sir.
and I'm counsel along with Mr. O'Meara for George Zimmerman.
Yes, sir.
Imagine if it was intimidating outside. It hasn't gotten any better yet. Would you care for some water?
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay. Just kind of take a deep breath.
Yes,
There's
sir.
no right or wrong answers.
That's
We're
true.
just trying to really know what you think and what you know. That's part of this information gathering
Yes.
process. So let's start with some really easy ones.
All right.
How long have you lived here in Central Florida?
Since 1987.
And where did you move from?
Atlanta.
Objection, Your Honor, this is beyond what we're here for at this time.
Yes, I'd like to keep it to the questionnaire questions at this time. We'll have an opportunity later to ask those type of biographical questions.
All right. Have you lived continuously in Seminole County since 1987?
No, sir.
Well, we'll talk about that more another day.
All right.
And you are retired from your occupation?
I am.
How long have you been retired?
The first time? I've been retired a couple times.
Well, you know what caught my attention was you said that you don't watch the news during the day.
No, sir, I don't.
So I was wondering maybe you just recently retired.
I retired somewhat permanently 5 years ago, but I retired the first time in 1991.
Okay.
Okay. I have a couple of careers since then.
I think that's probably something that we might explore later on as well.
Okay.
Except to the extent that that might affect how you gain access to the news or how you get information in general.
Currently,
Well, over the last year.
as I said, newspaper, TV, that's pretty much it. I don't do a lot of TV watching during the day. I stayed pretty busy doing different things.
And so it's not that you were at work and perhaps
no.
talking with coworkers.
No, I'm not, I don't work.
I know you also mentioned that you've been dealing with the executor responsibilities.
Yes, I have.
And has that been over the last 6 or 8 months?
It's been, yes, it's been since December of last year through, and I finalized everything the last week of April. So it's all completed.
Okay.
No more than the rest of the news, just read it as it, whatever news was presented, I just read it just to keep informed of what was going on.
Were you aware, are you aware of some of the issues in the case, decisions perhaps that Judge Nelson has made along the way that have been reported in the paper?
I'm not familiar with what, I don't know what you mean by issues.
That's well taken, because let me say it in a way I think that makes much more sense for someone reading the newspaper.
Okay.
As lawyers, we're thinking about evidentiary issues or issues regarding witnesses and such. I'm thinking of whether you followed the case to know, well, the lawyers are asking the judge to think about this, and then the judge decided to do this.
If I read it, I didn't retain it, so I'm sorry, I didn't follow it enough to pay attention to it and keep it in my head, if that's what you're asking. Is that what you're asking?
Yes,
remember
I guess that's a good point. What is it that sort of stands out to you in the case, other than you saying that your first impression was it was sad?
Yes, sir.
Did you think it was sad from a particular point of view?
Both sides. Loss of life is always sad.
Sure.
But sad on both sides.
In that you weren't quite sure what to make of it?
Right. I mean, it's just sad. And again, you're hearing all of the media information, and you don't know what happened. You weren't there, and even the people who lived there weren't sure what happened. So I just recall thinking how very sad. That's all I could think of.
Never imagining in a million years you'd be sitting in that chair.
No, sir, no.
Sure.
Not at all.
You mentioned that you knew that Mr. Zimmerman participated in the Neighborhood Watch.
I did.
Did you know that from the media?
Yes.
And how did you feel about that?
Well, I know that subdivisions have them. I live in an old subdivision. We don't, but we know everybody in the neighborhood, so I guess that's our own methodology. So that's all I know. Is I do know some controlled subdivisions have neighborhood watch programs.
Did you think that information itself was positive or negative or just?
I thought it was surprising that there was someone that was so active in it, I mean, active in that they really had somebody going out and be out in the neighborhood, because I always thought a neighborhood watch was just, you just happened to notice things, that was it. I wasn't aware that there were actually people who had a role in physically doing the watching. I thought it was just, if you see something, report it. If you see something concerning in your neighborhood, report it. That's all.
Did you get the impression that Mr. Zimmerman may have done something other than that?
No, just the fact that he was there outside. That's all I could remember thinking, that I didn't know that neighborhood watches were that organized, if you will. I just thought it was whomever perhaps wanted to involve themselves in the neighborhood activities.
As opposed to some sort of organization?
Yes, sir. I'm afraid I just haven't lived in a subdivision that had anything so organized or involvement of the locals that were living there.
Did you get the impression as you saw this case unfold in the media, in the newspaper,
Yes,
and
sir.
such, that George Zimmerman had done something wrong?
That he was where he wasn't supposed to be, you mean?
Yeah,
Oh, no, I never got that. I thought he was, like, he had a night that he was doing this, that it was his part of, as I said, it seemed very organized in terms of that was where he was supposed to be, doing what he was supposed to be doing, part of the Neighborhood Watch program. But I'm not familiar with, is that what you're asking?
Yes, as I mentioned right at the beginning, we're just trying to get
Right.
an idea of how this has registered with you.
Right, certainly.
What stands out in your mind, and that was one aspect of it. Do you think, based upon what you know, that George Zimmerman did anything wrong?
No, not in the sense of what he was involved with, no, sir.
Were there any reports that you read about how the case was supposed to have unfolded that made you think that he had disobeyed a request, or that he had done something against the wishes of law enforcement?
I don't understand the question. Say it again, or if you wouldn't mind. What do you mean?
It's sort of like whether he did anything wrong, and that was more specific. There's been a lot of discussion in the media about whether George Zimmerman followed Trayvon Martin.
Objection, Your Honor, in terms of getting into the facts as opposed to what this witness knows.
Give some leeway on that question. You may continue.
Pardon me? I'm sorry, I didn't
I
understand.
said I'll give you some leeway on that question. You may continue.
There's been a lot of discussion in the newspaper,
Yes.
as well as other media, whether or not George Zimmerman followed Trayvon Martin in the
Right.
neighborhood after being told not to.
Yes, sir.
Are you aware of that
I
generally?
do remember that being said.
How did you learn that
And
aspect?
that was in the paper with regard to him being told to not, to wait for the police, I think it was, or perhaps wait for the police. They were on their way. I'm not sure if that's what happened, if that's what I recall reading.
So that's really my question. First of all, is knowing that's been some discussion in the press.
Yes.
What is it that you remember along those lines? And then I'll ask you
Okay.
how it may have affected you.
Just that he had called the police, and the police had asked him to wait, and that they were on their way, and that was all. I'm not sure. I guess he didn't wait. I'm not certain. I don't recall the specifics of that, but me thinking he didn't wait is a problem.
Mm-hmm. So, your impression from reading that in the newspaper or from what other sources was that Mr. Zimmerman was told to wait, and
Right.
he didn't?
Didn't wait, and whatever happened, I don't know what first happened. I wasn't there, but certainly he didn't wait, or the police weren't quick enough. I don't know which came first, but he didn't listen to the police officer or whomever was telling him to wait.
And in that sense, do you think that he did something wrong?
Perhaps he did.
How would that affect you in reviewing the evidence in this case, that you've come into the case having heard that in the newspaper and sort of thinking perhaps he did do something wrong?
I guess wrong is an operative word. The result of was he didn't wait, and the rest, we know what happened. I'm not sure I'm following you. How do I feel about it?
Mm-hmm.
I certainly am aware that was part of the situation, was if he didn't wait.
Do you think then that to some degree you have an opinion that Mr. Zimmerman did something wrong in the case?
I should guess if if you want to ask in that way, yes, I guess he did do something wrong.
Okay. So the next part of that would
Yes.
be, if that's sort of your sense of this,
Uh-huh.
and you were to be a juror in the case
Mhm.
and hear evidence that was very different than that,
Okay.
that what you think may have happened from the newspaper didn't in fact happen.
Oh, I'd be happy to not form an opinion based on what I know or think I know. It's more from what I hear or what I would be presented here. I'm not closed-minded, if that's what you're asking. That I haven't made an opinion and I'm rigid about it.
Sure.
Okay.
All right. Yes, that's what I'm getting at. And of course, Mr. Delarionda wants to know the same,
Yes,
as
sir.
we all do,
Sure.
whether or not, if you come into the case knowing something about it,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe even forming an opinion
Sure.
about some aspect of the evidence,
Right.
whether or not that opinion would affect your ability to be fair and impartial as a juror.
I'm a pretty open-minded person. I'm not rigid in my thinking about pretty much anything. I can be made to think differently based on new information, correct information, whatever the case may be. That's just me personally. That's the way I am.
Are you saying that you're not someone who makes up their mind and then sticks with it?
If there's new information, I've been in managerial jobs all my life, and what sometimes is in front of you, if you get additional information, you've got to be big enough to stand up and say, okay, now let me change this. That type of thing.
Yes, thank you. Let's talk about that for just a minute. So
Okay.
are you saying that in your professional life, you've been in situations where you worked with a set of information and then that changed?
Sure.
How were you able to readjust?
Well, depending on the circumstances, I honestly believe that you can't just stand on a platform or an opinion. Even when you get new information, I think you've got to be strong enough to say, I screwed up, I change it, I'm making an amends, or I'm going to change my ruling, or whatever the case may be.
Mhm.
And that's just the way I am. Fair is fair. I believe in fairness.
So then if you heard something different in court from what you thought may have happened based upon your exposure to the media,
Yes, sir.
you feel that you personally are capable of reevaluating, readjusting,
I am.
and limiting your decision?
Yes, I am that way. I would be that way.
Is that something that you feel strongly about yourself?
Yes.
Is that something that you've done often at work?
In the past, certainly.
So in that sense, there may be, as an example, what we've talked about, there may be other things too.
Yes, sir.
Is there any aspect of the case that you feel strongly about so that it may be very difficult for you to alter your opinion or integrate new information into your decision?
No, sir.
That Trayvon Martin was a teenager?
No.
That he was unarmed?
No, sir.
Have you heard any of the evidence recordings in the case? Or are you aware that there are some recordings that were made that
I
night?
am aware, but I haven't heard.
You haven't heard any part of any of the recordings?
No, sir.
Have you followed in the newspaper any discussion about recordings that were made and whether or not they would be considered?
Yes, sir.
And what do you know about that?
I just know that I heard on the news that they have not, I don't know if you made a decision, but I just know that differing experts say you can't tell anything by what was stated of information. That was all I heard. So I don't know what came of it, and I didn't hear any recording. I just heard that it's not enough information. You got two sides of experts saying two different things.
How did that impact you? First of all, do you think that evidence is important in the case from what you've read?
I haven't given it any thought, to be honest with you. Honestly, I don't know. I'm sure it is important to somebody, but I haven't gone that far in my brain about that particular piece of information.
Do you know what's supposed to be on the recording that might be important to the case?
Do I know what's on the recording?
Not by having listened to it, by having heard it described or discussed.
Sure.
As to what this whole thing is about.
Yes, sir. I've heard that it's a recording of the struggle, and that there is some audible, but that it's not possible to know who, or different people say it's different, whether it's Mr. Martin or whether it's Mr. Zimmerman. It's hard to know whose voice it is. That's what I've heard. That was just recently, or last week, 2 weeks ago.
So on that subject, you're aware this evidence exists?
Yes, sir.
And that it's being discussed in court, what the importance of it is?
Yes, sir.
And whether or not it would be considered later?
Yeah, I'm aware that, I just don't know where you all are on that.
Mm-hmm. In other words, you're aware that that issue hasn't yet been decided?
That is an issue, yes.
Well, it's going to be decided
Yes, sir.
one way or the other, and we don't know which,
Yes, sir.
and I guess you don't either.
Sure.
So, knowing what the issue is and knowing what is being considered, is that something that you would be able to separate yourself from if you were on the jury and the information was allowed to be considered? Would you be able to, well, I'm saying that so badly, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
What if you, since you know about this information, what if you were on the jury and you weren't allowed to consider the information?
I'd have to put it out of my head. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, clearly I've been around enough to know you only can deal with what you're being presented, so I can't involve myself in something that is not available to me.
Mm-hmm. So you think, based upon your prior management experience and your ability to deal with sort of discrete
Yes.
sets of
Yeah,
information,
you just got to put that part away because it's not part of this particular procedure.
that you think you would be able to do that?
I would hope so, yeah.
Sure. I mean, you can.
I don't see why I'm not.
Mhm. Well, I think first and foremost, the jury may only consider the evidence that's offered in the trial.
Certainly.
So we start there.
Correct.
And what we're doing now with yourself and with everybody else is trying to figure out what they already know.
Sure.
That will either have to be ignored or...
Right. We all have biases coming into any phase of our lives, so I understand what you're saying, but no, I think I consider myself an intelligent person, and that I'm back to that fairness. What you present or what everyone presents, then we've got to listen to it very closely and form up an opinion and a decision based on that. So if that helps you in any way.
Of course, you've heard the expression, how do you unring the bell?
Certainly. Absolutely.
And that's sort of what we're asking now, is you've already heard
tough.
things. And when I say you, I mean collectively, the prospective jurors. And whether or not the juror is able to really separate that
Certainly.
and not consider it if it's not actually part of the trial.
Unless you've been living under a rock for the last year, it's going to be pretty hard for people not to have gotten some or a lot of information. But that's a tough job that you have, I'm sure, trying to find the people who can at least open their minds enough to hear what you have to say, those groups.
Well, you've shown remarkable insight into our very problem.
It's a problem.
And do you think that you're capable of that?
I'm capable.
Let me talk about a few other things very briefly.
Yes, sir.
Well, unless you hadn't finished.
No, I'm finished.
Okay. That you feel that you can do that?
I do.
Just to clarify, but you haven't actually watched any of the proceedings on television?
No.
You haven't attended any of the
No, sir.
rallies or events
No, sir.
connected with the case?
No, sir.
And you haven't heard any of the attorneys connected with the case, meaning with the defense, with the prosecution, or with the Martin family, the attorney spokespersons? You haven't heard any of them speak on television?
I've heard some of the Martin family attorneys. I don't see them here. I don't know who they are or to whom and what. But I remember seeing them at a memorial service. But that's all. I don't know who they are.
Do you know what was being said in connection with the?
I think it was just a memorial service or some vigil. I don't remember, I'm sorry, but I do still remember that it wasn't the two gentlemen sitting here, but I don't recall who they were.
Do you remember any of the content of the interview?
Just that it was a vigil.
And did it affect you in any way, either to increase your knowledge of the case or maybe affect you emotionally?
No, I don't even remember specifically. I just know that they were attorneys, but I don't know in what role they play in the part in this process. As I said, I haven't seen them, so perhaps they're not attorneys at all. I don't know, but it seemed that one of them was an attorney.
Do you remember if you've heard any interviews on television with Mr. Tracy Martin, Trayvon Martin's father, or Ms. Sabrina Fulton, Trayvon?
No,
Martin's
I haven't.
mother?
I have not watched any of those. I know that they've been on, but I haven't watched them.
And do I understand correctly that you never watch the, for lack of a better term, the discussion shows, like Sean Hannity, Bill O'Reilly, Richard Maddow,
No, sir,
Al
I don't.
Sharpton?
My parents do, but I don't. No, I don't.
So you don't have any preference for any of that kind of social political discussion?
No, I don't have the time or the energy to listen to them.
Sounds like you don't have the interest.
That's
Sure.
yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
Excuse me, just one minute. Based upon your review, especially of the Orlando Sentinel, it sounds like, have you heard any opinions expressed or any reporting on how this case was handled by the police department?
Oh, yes, certainly. That was part of the early onset of information that was forthcoming and the changing in the guard of the chief of police.
how did that, or what did you think about that?
I thought it was embarrassing, but I don't really recall now why everybody was concerned about. I don't know what mishandling the police did. I just remember them saying that perhaps it was that there wasn't a expedient arrest in the process. Honestly, I remember that was more the concern for the community, was not handled that correctly as it should, perhaps.
That Mr. Zimmerman wasn't arrested as soon as some people think he should have been?
Correct. That was the big impetus back then.
You used the word mishandled.
Yes, sir.
Have you concluded that somebody did something wrong in that regard?
Based on, I don't know that it's a conclusion, it's just the end result was somebody felt that it was mishandled, and therefore the new we have a new chief of police here or something, a new police chief for Sanford. But I'm afraid I don't follow that as well as I should maybe, but I live in Oviedo. So I don't really pay that much attention.
That's not, of course, the police department that's where you are.
Pardon me, sir?
It's not the same police department that
totally
you have.
different.
Well, based upon what you learned in the paper, which, as you pointed out accurately, at some point in time, the police chief was replaced.
Correct. I do remember that.
And that there was some public discussion and a lot of discussion about whether Mr. Zimmerman should have been arrested sooner than he was.
Correct.
What do you think? Should he? Should he have been arrested? Did the Sanford Police Department do anything wrong?
I do. Honestly, I don't know what to think. I mean, again, I wasn't there. You read what you read, and I remember seeing Mr. Zimmerman being taken into the police department on the TV and the news, and that's pretty much the back of his head, showing a picture of that. That's all I can recall. I don't remember the specifics, but I just remember that people were upset that he wasn't arrested as quickly as they thought he should be.
And as we all have the right to our opinions, my question for you is whether you think that's true, that based upon what you know, in some way the police mishandled the investigation in this case.
I don't know that I can say that they mishandled it. They were following, I guess everyone has rights, and they were probably recognizing his too, trying to find the facts before they made any decision to arrest Mr. Zimmerman.
Do you think there's anything wrong with doing a thorough investigation
No, I
before
don't.
you make a decision?
No, I don't. And then once I guess they've further investigated, they made the arrest.
Were you aware of any discussion of a new prosecutor being considered or being appointed?
No, sir.
Did you see some of the pictures in the paper of Mr. Zimmerman's injuries?
Yes, sir.
And is that what you were referring
Yes.
to? Did you form any opinion based upon what you've seen in the newspaper or on television who started the fight?
I'm not sure I formed an opinion. I remember reading about it. I'm not sure. Seems to me that I recall that it was Mr. Zimmerman that approached the young man. But I don't, honestly, I know you're living with this every day, but I haven't been, so I really don't retain that much about the particulars. I'm sorry, I don't recall, but I don't have an opinion. I just remember some of the details. They're a little sketchy.
If I'm understanding correctly, although you have lots of information about the case, very little of it has formed a fixed opinion in your mind?
True.
And even with regards to something as basic as who started the fight,
Correct.
that if you were to hear evidence in the case that may have conflicted, with what you heard earlier? Are you comfortable setting that aside and applying the evidence here?
Yes.
You mentioned that you had talked with some out-of-state family, I think, about the case. Were they far enough out of state that all they got was their local news or the national news on this?
Probably the national news, Atlanta. I have friends in Atlanta.
What did they want to know?
How close are you? How close do you live to Sanford? That was more the geographical. They couldn't get a sense of where Sanford was. They didn't know where it was.
Did you? Could you estimate how many times you may have engaged in a conversation related to this case with your friends and family?
Back when it was fresh, probably half a dozen times.
How about in the last 6, 8, or 10 months?
None. Except in the last month when I got my jury notice, and then of course I thought, I couldn't be that lucky or unlucky, however you want to look at it. That really, I was surprised, but then I didn't know y'all were looking at the jury at that time. So then as it got closer, I knew that was here, and everyone in my family knows. Then I got jury duty. You've sort of mentioned that your conversations with friends and family were early in the case as opposed to recent. Yeah, because it was in the news.
But your discussion, or your review of the newspaper in particular, was pretty continuous through today. As
it appeared in the paper, I would read it, yes.
Have you seen some things in the paper that sounded one way early on that may now be different?
Perhaps, but I don't recall what those things particularly were.
When you being able to fulfill your oath as a juror and your civic duty?
No, sir.
So the intimidation of the process, in your mind, would it carry into the jury room?
No, sir. I feel that this is a process, and I believe that everybody has Mr. Zimmerman's interest for a fair trial, and as jurists, I think we would probably be very well protected. I'm not concerned or fearful. As I said, it was more a surprise to see so much. I didn't don't sit in courtrooms and be a part of trials as a general spectator. So I was just kind of surprised to see so much interest and so much coverage outside of our community.
Sure. There, today, for example, there's anonymity in the sense that no one is seeing your face on television.
Yes, sir.
And your name is being withheld from the public.
Correct.
There may come a time later where your name could be released to the public.
Okay.
If knowing that's a possibility, given the circumstances that we're talking about, would that cause you any concern or any reservation to participating in the jury?
I wouldn't think so, but I mean, again, I guess I always wondered why people would do those kinds of things, or call, or are you saying they would call me or follow me, or I wouldn't be threatened. I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm not sure I'm following what I would have to be worried about. Would I have to be worried about somebody doing something to me because I was a jurist?
Well, I wouldn't think so,
Okay.
but it's really what you might be concerned
Oh,
about.
no, I wouldn't. I mean, I know jurists in the past in important cases have appeared on shows and talk shows. I would hope that we wouldn't go that particular route. That's not I'm not interested in any limelight. I'm not writing a book. I just want to do what I have to do and go home.
Well, certainly no one, you don't have to talk to anyone ever.
No,
if you don't choose
that's
to.
fine. That's a good thing. And that's an option, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, without question, it's always your choice.
Yeah.
Whether someone might
It's not mine.
attempt to talk with you is a different matter.
Yeah. I'm
And
not
then
one of those.
The idea of perhaps at some point your identity being known,
Objection
whether,
as to that, Your Honor. I believe the court's already instructed regarding this.
I'm going to sustain.
I would like to inquire about whether any aspect of that might affect the juror's ability to sit.
And you can do that in the regular voir dire. Right now, we're doing the pre-publicity.
Very well. May I have one moment?
Yes, you may.
Just
Sure. Sure.
thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Please remain seated. When counsel is ready, please approach.